Chapter 5, Lesson 4, the distributive property. You will be able to apply the distributive property to rewrite algebraic expressions. The distributive property states that to multiply a sum or a difference by a number, multiply each term inside the parentheses by the number outside the parentheses. So really what you're doing is you're taking that number on the outside and giving every term on the inside that number. And the way you give that number is by multiplication. So for example, if we were to do 4 times 6 plus 2 in parentheses, we would do 4 times 6, then 4 times 2, and bring your plus sign over. Same with subtraction. 3 times 7 and 3 times 5, and bring your minus sign down. Now, this can get a little tricky when you have negative numbers. So really we can see this negative 5, or this 5, minus 5, as a negative 5. So this could really be interpreted as 3 times negative 5, okay? Which would mean it's a negative number, therefore the subtraction sign. Let's do some examples and take a look. Simplify the following expressions using the distributive property. When it tells you to use the distributive property, you must simplify it that way. Even though you might think, well, I'll use the order of operations and do what's inside the parentheses first. You can't. When it specifically tells you to do something a certain way, you have to do it that way. So the distributive property means I'm going to take what's on the outside of the parentheses and distribute it to what's on the inside. So what I'm really doing is 8 times negative 9 plus 8 times 4. And I'm actually going to switch these to parentheses to make it look a little neater. Well, 8 times negative 9 is negative 72 plus 8 times 4 is positive 32. And then simplify from here. You have different signs, so different signs difference. Subtract and get 40. Keep the sign of the larger absolute value. Therefore, negative 40. Letter B, distribute by multiplying. So 5 times negative 9 plus 5 times 11. 5 times negative 9 is negative 45 plus 5 times 11, which is positive 55. Different signs difference, subtract, and keep the sign of the larger absolute value. So 10 is your simplification. Letter C, 7 times 10 minus 7 times 5. Again, taking that 7 and distributing it or multiplying it by both numbers on the inside. So we get 70 minus 35. I will not subtract, but I will add the opposite. Actually, let's rewrite that. Different signs difference. Subtract them and keep the sign of the larger. Well, the larger is positive, so 35. Letter D, it's okay that the number on the outside of the parentheses is after it. Just distribute it in. 9 times 12, and make sure you keep it in that order. Minus 9 times 8. So in other words, I kept the 12 first and then the 8 second. We read left to right. 9 times 12 is 108. Minus 9 times 8, which is 72. Well, I will not subtract. I will add the opposite. Different signs difference. And this one I'm going to do off to the side. This would be 6 and 3. So 36 and positive because the larger absolute value is 36. Mr. Ito needs to buy batting helmets for a baseball team. The helmets he plans to buy are $19.95 each. Find the total cost if Mr. Ito needs to buy 9 batting helmets for the team. Now what we can do here is to make this easier, to make this mental math a little bit easier, we can take the $9 and we can actually break up $19.95. Well, $19.95 would round to $20 nicely. So we can say $20, but it's really $20 minus 5 cents. So if we just replace that $19.95 with 20 minus 5 cents, it'll actually make our mental math a little bit easier. And this is where the distributive property really comes into play. Okay, if I didn't have a calculator, I didn't want to do that long math, I could do it this way a lot quicker. So again, $19.95 is really $20 minus 5 cents. So now let's use the distributive property. 9 times 20, well, 18, add a 0, minus 9 times 5 cents. Well, 9 times 5 is 45. There are 2 decimal points, so 0.45. And then we are left with 180 minus 0.45. Some of you may be able to do this in your head, but if not, we'll do a lot of borrowing here. 55971. So he would need $179.55. A sports club rents dirt bikes for $37.50 each. Find the total cost for the club to rent 20 bikes. Justify your answer by using the distributive property. Here again, it mentions that we have to use the distributive property. Well, we have 20 bikes, and we have $37.50. So what we can do, let's go the other way. Let's use addition instead this time. I can take $30 plus $7.50. I can do those relatively easily in my head. So now distribute. 20 times 30 is 600. 2 times 3 is 6. Add 2 zeros. Plus 750 times 20. I think $7.50 times 2 is 15, but add a 0. So 150. Add it together. $750. This also becomes useful when we're dealing with variables, which we are going to start to see a lot more of this year. You can only combine like terms. If there aren't any like terms, then stop simplifying. Simplify the following expressions using the distributive property. Like terms are numbers with the same variable expressions. So 2x and 3x are like terms. However, 4x and 5y are not like terms because they don't have the same variable combination. Similarly, 2 and negative 3 are like terms. They don't have any variables. But 2x and negative 3 are not like terms because negative 3 doesn't have a matching variable. Okay? So here we go. We are going to use the distributive property. 4 times x plus 4 times 7. Well, 4 times x is just 4x, because we don't know what x is, plus 4 times 7 is 28. We cannot add them together because one has an x, the other one doesn't, therefore not like terms. Letter B, 6 times p minus 6 times 5. Well, 6 times 5 is 30, so 6p minus 30. Cannot combine them. They are not like terms. Therefore, that is our answer. Letter C, this time we've got some negatives going on. We are distributing negative 2. So negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times 8, and here's where I would say it's negative 8. So negative 2 times negative 8 is positive 16. So when you're multiplying a negative times a negative, even if that negative is a subtraction sign, negative times a negative, it then becomes a positive. And that would be your answer there. To write it out a little bit better here, it would be negative 2 times x. Let's say I brought down that minus sign. No big deal. We would have negative 2 times 8. So if I simplify it here, negative 2 minus, well, negative 2 times 8 is negative 16. And then I will not subtract. I will add the opposite. I still get the same answer. So this up here is just a little bit of a shortcut to not deal with all these negatives. If you're doing a negative times a negative, you can automatically say it's positive. Let's take a look at D. 5 times negative 3x plus 5 times 7y. 5 times negative 3x would be negative 15x plus 5 times 7y would be 35y. Now, you can, if you would like, skip that step. However, if you like seeing it to see your thought process, perfectly fine. Letter E, fraction. 1/3 times x is 1/3 x. And then we have 1/3 times negative 6, so minus 1/3 times negative 6. Now we have fractions here, so let's put that negative 6 over 1, and let's multiply those fractions. And let me rewrite this 6 here. There we go. So we have, remember this can act as a negative, so negative 1, oops, it's not negative 6, it's positive 6. Let me fix that. Okay. So 1 times 6 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3. So 1/3 x minus 6 over 3. But you can do 6 over 3. 6 over 3 is really 6 divided by 3, which is 2. So this is 1/3 x minus 2. Letter F. It would be 6 times a plus 6 times 4, which would be 6a plus 24. Can't combine. Here's another weird negative one. So we have negative 3 times y. And again, we have negative and negative. So it's really positive, because a negative times a negative is a positive. 3 times 10. So negative 3y plus 30. Letter H, 1/2 w, or 1/2 times w minus 4. Distribute that. 1/2 times w minus 1/2 times 4. Let's put that over 1. 4 times 1 is 4. 2 times 1 is 2. So this is 1/2 w minus 4 over 2. But I know that 4 over 2 reduces to 2. So this is 1/2 w minus 2. Letter I are numbers on the right-hand side, which is fine. So negative 7 times d plus negative 7 times 2. So negative 7d plus negative 14. You could also write this as negative 7d minus 14. Doesn't matter. So this one right here is negative 3 times 5. And again, we've got negative and negative, which makes a positive. And then it's just 3 times b. So we have negative 15 plus 3b.